Hey everyone, Abraham here. So last week, if you listened in, we did part 1 of our self-management episode, and we actually split it in half. And so part 2 this week is going to start right in the middle of where we were at when we were recording. And so this week we will be hearing part 2 of our self-management episode. So if you haven't heard part 1, it will be a little bit confusing. You should go back and listen to part 1 before listening to this episode. But otherwise, if you've heard part 1, then I hope you enjoy.
I think a very important part of any of this is, and part of why we don't know how to kind of fix this across the board through all these different industries, like I talked about, and things like that, is there's a process of measuring what you're doing and seeing if it's working for you specifically or not. It's very important. So if I had a history of growing up with a drill sergeant, in a military family or something like that, where that was kind of what we did, and that was a part of kind of my value system, what was instilled in me, then those sort of processes might work really well for my goal setting.
That's fair. That's
right?
a great point.
And that might be actually like a go-to that I would use in that situation because it's going to give me what I want. Whereas other times I might not use that, right? If I had a different history, that might not be my one. So what I was getting at was, we call it single subject design. Really what it is you're just focusing on your individual progress and what's actually influencing it.
Yeah.
So with that.
So it's like in terms of research, it's like a case study, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you can have multiple cases within a single sort of attempt to change something, but where you're really looking at the patterns as they change within one person.
Yeah. So a case study, we can get into specifics of like case studies versus other ones maybe sometime. So we can kind of look at the research.
I think it'd probably be useful. I actually like talking about these when I'm teaching because when we go through trying to evaluate how good a research is, and a lot of people will look at if it's an N of 1 or a single case or within subject controls, and they're like, that's bad. And I'm like, well, it depends on the question you're asking. Because it's not, group designs are not the only way to ask a research question, and single subject designs are not the only way to, there's different ways depending on the question you're asking. We got way off track. I'm sorry.
Well,
I love that stuff.
The way to kind of tie it back in is like, I think self-management's about the individual, right?
Yeah, okay, great point.
Why not pull those things in there? So,
that's a good point.
A way to kind of do that is maybe what you do is you download that app and you know that for the last couple weeks you haven't really been running at all. Mm-hmm. You try that app for a couple weeks after that. Maybe you try it for 20 days or something like that. And you look at your progress there. You could even delete that app if you want to go that far and see whether or not your running maintains, right?
So you're measuring the whole time?
Yeah, you continue measuring, exactly. So you kind of have this like first condition where you've like, your baseline that you talked about, like, it's not really working and I want to kind of make some changes.
Running at
Download
0.
this app. I run a little bit. I stop opening the app, or I stop, which is a little different question, but or I delete the app to see if it's actually motivating me. Now what we did is we kind of had baseline, we tried something, we went back to baseline, we could see whether or not we kind of fall back to our normal levels, and then you could actually decide whether or not to again implement that treatment again.
I feel like I would delete the app and then I'd be like, I'm going to prove this app wasn't helpful by going running right now.
And that might actually be, so that would tell you, hey, maybe what it is you want to do it in the spite of something, right?
Right.
So
I need a cause.
I actually set a lot of goals because I see things that are like, I wish I could do that differently than how they're doing it. And it's kind of that same thing. The motivation is kind of like, let's do it in spite of this other thing.
I realize that's, I think in part why I wanted to do this podcast. So
that is a little part of it. Yeah, that's part of it here, but it's a lot different for me too. Yeah. So it's actually using that idea of, let's measure our progress. Let's be very careful in tracking what worked, what didn't work. As for what I alluded to of like actually opening the app, that's always going to be a problem until someone really hits that really solid process on self-management, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I know that for myself, I can find excuses for like my email is a really good example of this. I didn't respond to the email because I didn't read the email. I didn't read the email because I didn't open the app, and that is my legitimate excuse for why I did not know that I was supposed to do this thing. So for me, it is a way of diffusing my responsibility and getting out of obligations and. Totally not. I don't go out this, I'm going to have an excuse today. Yeah. But I know that looking at the pattern of my behavior that I only mention this because it's what's related to the thing about opening the app. That is its own step in the process. And the whole, I have to open my email to look at it. I'm like, well, just don't open my email. Yeah. Boom. Problem avoided. Yeah. So knowing how you can almost play whack-a-mole with what's the newest barrier that I've gotten, that's gotten in my way of this. Yeah. So that actually brings me back to the question I had of whether or not you feel like it's useful to look at what are the things that are my barriers to hitting these goals or even setting the goals, and what is maintaining those barriers.
Yeah.
And so for me, like going back to the whole email example, I know people rely on me to be checking my emails and respond to them quickly, and I get overwhelmed really easily. And so a barrier that I have is like, just don't check it. Like, don't even open it, don't read it, don't.
Yeah.
Then I don't have I have an excuse not to have responded to it. And so what maintains that is that keeps my to-do list smaller.
Yep.
It allows me the excuse of taking breaks and getting out of things that I feel like I don't want to do them. And I don't know they are sometimes.
Yeah.
But like I just want to reduce the amount of things I have to do.
Yeah.
And so for me, identifying that is a barrier, and what is maintaining that barrier is escaping from to-do list items.
Yeah.
Or avoiding them altogether.
Yeah. So part of mine in the email example is just like there's so much, because I like to like follow a lot of like folks that talk about like what they're doing, kind of keeping up to date on like what our field's doing.
Yeah.
And for me, one quick simple change was finding a program. I actually used Outlook originally to filter all of my things. And you can set up the rules. And when I set that up, like, it was so much easier, because I could actually find, for me, I'd find the most important, I'd reply and handle those.
Yeah.
I knew everything that wasn't important, and it wasn't kind of overwhelming.
I gotcha.
So yeah, there's different ways to tackle those barriers.
Cool. So do you feel like that's relevant in terms of setting up the self-management system that you've talked about?
Yeah, identifying your barriers.
Yeah,
it's huge. So yeah, we recently did an event where we worked with some folks about on these sort of things in a professional realm, and we hit the values, the goals, and we had a whole activity just on the barriers.
Right.
What are your barriers you're likely to run into, and how can you plan for them? Also, when you're going to run into them.
Yeah.
It's like a part of like what I do on my day to day is I actually plan at least a 2-hour. It's not total. It's a 2-hour block.
Yeah.
But I have 2 hours of my day, usually in 15 to hour long blocks of I'm going to handle whatever I run into for that day at that time. It took me so long to figure out like how to actually do that. And certain days I plan more or less time, because I'm getting better at predicting like what sort of things I might run into.
Yeah.
Some days I really mess it up.
Yeah.
And I kind of have to put a lot of stuff to the wayside. But I actually start planning in those sort of things of I'm going to run into barriers, and I'm going to handle these sort of barriers.
Okay.
And in the moment, it's hard to still tackle those sort of things, because you're just like, oh man, I want to deal with this. But when I have that time set aside, it's just like, all right, I knock all those things out that are in my way, and then I sit down and hit the other things I really value again.
I gotcha.
So that's been a useful strategy for me, especially in the professional realm. So I just wanted to, I guess we can maybe segue.
I have 3 things specifically I'm thinking of, but do you have like what are your specific topics? So you want to talk about public commitments?
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the running thing that I said.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So my thing was that I guess there's 2 quick things, because it kind of goes with the support network. A public commitment is very important, so we can hit stick contracts in a bit.
Okay.
And what those are, and what that kind of approach was. But then there's these contingency managers. So sometimes people will say you need to have a contingency manager. Contingency is just if-then relation. If I do this, then this happens.
Okay.
Ideally, it's if this happens and only if this happens, then I get this. It's a
Makes
very
me think
strong contingency.
Sort of like a military contingency.
Yeah.
Like an operation.
Or Armageddon, where do you have a contingency plan?
Yeah.
Contingency plan. Yeah, exactly.
Good reference.
That's about the only pop culture reference you get out of me.
Oh, man. I have to work on that.
So the idea of a contingency manager would be very useful to recruit someone to help you kind of watch these sort of things. I think one thing I just want to mention here is those procrastinators. It's actually useful to work with your contingency manager on setting goals earlier than they're actually due. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily get them done, but that social pressure, especially if you have the right people on the support network, what you can do is you can actually establish hitting your goals earlier than the original deadlines over time. And you can actually work on solving some of those last-minute procrastinations.
Yeah.
And then one other thing before we jump into some other stuff is the very nature of goal setting and values and like doing your daily action and moving towards things is you only have 24 hours in a day. There's no way you're going to change that, right? Really don't think there's a way that's going to change too much. You can sleep less and those sort of things. But at the end of the day, really, you can only work so much towards a certain value or goal. Yeah. And the very nature of engaging in that means you're going to have incompatible things that you cannot work towards.
So be mindful of what you're capable of and what your time supports. That sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So like
that's a hard skill.
Yeah.
Like that's a really difficult lesson to learn.
Yeah, and
I'm still not good at it.
Part of it there is just like, let's be really compassionate towards that idea of like, I'm not going to be able to get to everything. I'm going to do the best that I can.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this messed up part of it as well of like, spending time on one value means you're not going to be able to hit the others. Like
Yeah.
a lot of social activities involve, at least in my life and a lot of American life, I think involves food and alcoholic beverages or things like that.
Yeah.
Like, but those can actually work directly against healthy goals. I recently have been working on that running stuff a lot, and I've totally cut out a lot of social events, and I didn't realize why, but I realized it's because it led to those sort of things, which made it harder for my goals of running and stuff. So you're kind of like in hindsight, you're like, oh, like that's why I haven't seen my friends as much as I usually do.
Yeah.
Or likely why.
Yeah.
You know, when I go back to my other change and I get back into that kind of baseline again, I
Mm-hmm.
can see like, was that part of what might influence it?
And actually, it's a good point to bring up that you can get really good at self-management and then lose sight of the other things that are valuable to you.
Yep.
And I definitely have had that experience where there are things that are important to me, and I'm already doing values-based things, and so I let those. I'm like, I can find room here by cutting out a little time of this thing.
Yep.
And I can find room here by cutting. And
Yep.
so what I end up doing is I end up getting rid of so many elements of things that are important to me, but I can always make excuses because they were present at the time.
Yep.
So it's like, I'm doing plenty of this already. I can cut that here. And then I miss out on some things.
I'll go on the record that I did that way too much in grad school, and I lost touch with a lot of family and friends that I've had to work on kind of rebuilding some relationships over.
Yeah.
And that's taken years to actually achieve. And then there's still things where I find myself doing that. And it's a battle in which I still have to choose one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have some really close family members that still, like, we have these conversations about, like, how much time I'm spending where. And it's because of that competing kind of values and the way I kind of judge myself and, like, the way I kind of justify it. And it's always... It shows very much that as much as it's self-management, quote unquote, it is very much not just the self. It's everybody else around you that makes that self valuable, right?
Okay, yeah,
cool.
That's a good point.
So the one thing we didn't really hit specifically is like the measurable component. We should always measure the things as kind of the last part. So I mentioned 3 areas: values, goal setting, and then the last one's kind of like daily action, which we've talked this entire time about.
Mm-hmm.
Big thing there is measure, whether that's a frequency, how often it happens in a day, a week, a month, a year, the duration that you're running. Find something that's tangible that you can count.
Mm-hmm.
Count those things, however you want to do it. Spreadsheet, notebook, tallies.
Yeah.
You throw them up on the wall, graphs.
Some people like to have
Just
like
start
little
doing
beads
something.
that they wear. And
Yeah. Pick something, start looking at it, and look at the progress. I don't think you have to do that if you're very good at paying attention to kind of what's going on around you.
Right.
And you can kind of recall those sort of things.
Yeah, some people are great at just sort of having a good finger on their pulse of what the behavior they're already doing, like how much that occurs. And like sometimes there's like good written records of that as well.
Yeah. So that's kind of the long story long on self-management, the kind of framework I've come into. All of those areas, values, goal setting, and daily action are all very much in the psychological nature. I know how much we have to bring those back in and kind of hit that point. So what else we got to cover?
There's a couple of things I wanted to go into. One was just, I feel like this has been a very personal sort of episode, which is great. I love it.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the story about my running. There's one other thing I was going to talk about when I got into a little bit of this like self-discovery of like how much I can actually control my own behavior more so than I used to think, where I did a really long fast. Well, not really long. People fast way longer than this, but for me it was really long. Where I never had any desire to do this before. And it just happened to be this one time that like I came home late from work and I hadn't eaten since like noon, and it was 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, it's too late to eat anything. And I was grumpy anyway. And I don't think I'd ever skipped a meal up to that point in my life. You know? And so I went to bed thinking like, I'm probably not going to wake up. Like I'm probably going to die because I didn't have dinner, And so I went to bed and I woke up and I felt fine. And I was like so fine, in fact, that I was like, I feel like I should at least feel queasy. But I woke up and I felt fine. And I kind of went from there. I'm like, I wonder, like maybe I don't really need to eat as much as I'm eating. And that spiraled out of control quickly. But so what I did is I was like, well, I'm just going to start skipping. Like I'm going to stop eating past like 5 o'clock because clearly I can wait till, all the way till morning. And like I'm going to only eat nothing past 5. And I'm like, well, that was pretty easy. I'll scale it back to 3. I'll scale it back to noon. And then it was like, I'm going to eat just breakfast. And I did that for a couple months. And then I was like, I really like drinking like juices and water and tea. I'm like, I bet I could just do that.
Yeah.
And so I prepped myself for this, and I planned to do 10 days originally, but I was much younger at the time. This happened. Day 10 would have landed on the day that I was planning to go to Warped Tour in California.
Okay.
And it's like, I'm already by the time I'm in the middle of this fast, I'm like already passing out sometimes. So I'm like, I probably don't want to go stand in the heat for 14 hours without having any
Smart decision.
Yeah, so I decided to break my fast a little bit early. But this experience I had, and one of the things that I loved about it, because even though it was crazy and I lost a ton of weight, and I was passing out just from standing up because that took all the energy I had.
Yeah.
And I had this idea of like I was going to drink juice and drink all these liquids. I was barely doing any of that. It was mostly just water if I had time for water.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I ended this, what I was experiencing was every time I felt hunger, it was this, yes, I did it again. I'm successful. And it was because it was this whole thing of I was able to regulate my behavior and endure past these things that were getting in my way
Mm-hmm.
that would normally present themselves as, first of all, a cue of you need to eat something or you're going to die.
But it was perceived as kind of these challenges.
Yeah, it was. Exactly right. And so the thing that was rewarding about it was the self-management aspect. It was because I could control these things I didn't think I could control before.
Yeah.
And so I starved myself for 8 days, and
Uh-huh.
I lost, I weighed as much as I did when I was in like 5th grade in my 20s.
Yeah.
And,
was that the one where you took photos to like
yeah.
see?
Yeah, I have all these pictures of it. I'm like
Yeah.
just wasting away.
Yeah.
And
I remember meeting you and hearing this story at first, and I was like, I cannot understand why someone would ever do that. That's just when I was like, why would someone run? And like, it was before the self-management process, and I totally agree that the process of engaging in it is so rewarding that it kind of gets into those sort of things.
Yeah, it was a lot about that. It was a lot about that.
Just pictures and your muscles actually like some atrophy occurring.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, as a result of just not eating.
Yeah, I didn't have the energy to exercise at all.
Yeah.
Like when I started
it went from to paint the picture, like Abraham is just kind of day-to-day form, right?
Yeah.
And then like you could see the fat kind of like eat away, and you could actually start to see the muscles eat away.
Yeah.
Like in the pictures, and I'd never seen something like that, and I was just
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. This gaguy's nuts.
And it was just I know that I'm not trying to like go on this thing of fasting is so healthy and you can lose all this weight and all of that and like I literally just did it to see if I could.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think that I could.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that was something
It's a
that I
perfect
was
example
capable
of
of.
how extreme it can get pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
And like how,
That definitely
careful.
began to clash with my values, like really. And the other thing, and I actually had some contention with my family because they're like, we want to have dinner with you. I'm like, I'm not going to eat anything. And don't try and make me because I'm going to hate you forever.
Yeah.
And like, I was very grumpy. But I really, really enjoyed this aspect of it of, whoa, I can control so much of my behavior I didn't know I could control.
Well, great power comes great responsibility, right?
I guess. The last thing I feel like I wanted to touch on, well, I wanted to ask you the question. Is it all willpower?
Is it all willpower?
Yeah. Is someone who does this because they lack willpower because they're a bad person?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. And that's, I was trying to hit that. Like, you're not bad for not doing these sort of things.
Right.
It's very much just where are we at, where do I want to go, and creating that kind of supporting, pro-social, nurturing environment around how do we move forward. I think the key parts are a lot of the techniques and kind of how-tos that we talked about, plus finding someone that really knows how to tackle that thing you're trying to tackle. So I referenced them earlier as a subject matter expert. Yeah. So those things might be an app. I'm kind of embedded in that sometimes, but there's so many people out there that I never realized like how far an email or a tweet or whatever it is in the future that pops up actually goes. Yeah. Just asking somebody like, hey, can you help me out and mentor me in these sort of things, right? So that's an important part of it. So. Yeah, and I mean, I guess I sort of addressed this in the beginning of when people do this, and you're like, how is they able to starve yourself for 8 days? How is this person able to be so good with their money? How is this person so good at self-managing? And then just like they just have great willpower. Like that doesn't tell you anything. What they have is they have a good system and good support and good experiences that have enabled them to do this. Yeah, and I was gonna say they probably spent a hell of a long time trying to work on that. Yeah. Just recently, I've kind of been working on formally kind of getting some projects out there that I've been working on professionally, and people see a few different ones kind of shaping up. And like, how do you have the time for this? And it's like, I don't think you realize how long I've been working on these, how much I've learned of how I can achieve them on my own, how I need to learn other skills, how I need to find the right people, and then how much there's other behind the scenes, how much there is like completely behind the scenes that is just not me. Yeah. There is so many other people there. So it's been a very big point of like, it's not really a self-management. I've got this down. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I've got it down, and my system's coming together. It took me 8 years, and I could count. I literally would need somewhere around. There's 100 people day to day to some extent that is involved in like why I do what I do, and
So self-management in this case
self-management,
is almost a misnomer because you're not managing yourself.
Yep.
You have a system and a support and like those things that help regulate it for you. Probably some people like I didn't really have a lot of support with some of the things that I've done, but there was a set of circumstances that led to that.
Yep.
And those were things that were not just myself. And so that's the last thing.
Yeah. Theoretically, like there has to always be someone else involved.
Yeah. So I think we've already been on this for a really long time. This is probably the longest episode ever. I figured it might be useful to just talk about what are some of the tools out there. We've mentioned some apps and whatnot.
Yeah.
And there was two specifically, one specifically that I was thinking of that we talked about. You actually mentioned a little bit with the stick contracts.
Yeah.
This thing called stick.com. And we're not advocating for or against this.
2 Ks. STICKK.
Or STIKK, something like that.
One of the two, sorry.
Yeah, something like that. If you Google it, you'll find it. Yeah. And if you look up Carrots and Sticks, is a book by the Ian Ayres wrote the book. With Stick.com, the way that it's set up is it's a nonprofit, and you have something that you want to accomplish in your self-management system, and you go on and you pledge a certain amount of money, and they recommend a lot to an anti-charity. So most people will go on and they'll do something like a political party they don't like. So a Republican will go on and they're like, let's say during the last election, a Republican might go on and say like, if I don't hit my self-management goals, I'm giving $100 to Hillary Clinton every month. And on the opposite side of that, Democrat might go on and be like, if I don't hit my self-management goals, I'm giving $100 to the Trump campaign every month. And so there's supposed to be this motivation of like, I don't want to lose my money, and I really don't want to lose my money if it's going to this event. And so they don't. Because there's people who might be like, well, I'm going to pledge mine to a charity I really agree with. But then it's like, if you don't hit your goal, then it's like you did something that you wanted.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a scapegoat there or a way out of having to endure that. And then they also enroll other people that you are supposed to support them. But why might this not work for everyone?
I mean, I got a specific example of myself that I can bring up. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of mine was daily fruit and veggie intake.
And you use stick.com for this?
I did.
Okay.
I will share it with the podcast notes.
Okay.
It was, 3.5 years of a struggle and self-management to like get these back up, like get these where I wanted to.
Okay.
So I actually started tracking them when I learned about stick.com.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, set up a stick contract. I'm going to eat my daily recommended amount of like whatever it is, 2.5 cups of fruit and 3.5 cups of vegetables or something like that. And so I did that, and lo and behold, bam, I was doing very good at eating my fruits and veggies. I remember exactly what it was that I was donating to one of the parties was a concept. And what it did is it was very successful in the short term. When I ended the stick contract, everything dropped.
Yeah, okay.
Didn't work.
So it's lacking that maintenance piece of like a whole system.
Yes. And I know that works for some folks. It'll be just enough to get you going and like get those things going, which this is kind of like going to have to be self-management part 2 of like this like concept of behavior relations. So like engaging in certain behavior can lead to other behavioral things kind of happening. So like I do one habit, and as a result, another habit forms. It's even like that's part of that. So like for my example, what I did was it didn't work. I kind of struggled on and off of it for a couple years. And it was a result of my truck actually breaking down and not having all the cash to like fix it immediately. That
like French fries. To do it.
So what I did was, and it was actually a very nice time of year. So I was like, I'll just ride my bike. Like I used to ride my bike to work. So I jumped on my bike, rode my bike. I rode my bike for 3 or 4 days. And I was like, hey, this is getting better. This is actually kind of fun. It's really nice. That was a perfect time of year to be riding it. And as a result of me having to go farther and farther and like enjoying it, it was harder to eat unhealthy food. It was hard to hop on the bike right afterwards, but it was actually basically making it much more likely that I was going to eat healthy. So what I did is I started eating a lot of fruit and veggies as a result of these other behavioral changes that happened in my life. And it got me up to contacting the natural rewards that comes with having kind of more healthier lifestyle. So for me, what it was I wasn't kind of catching that maintenance piece.
Okay.
And I'm not exactly sure as to why. Definitely part of it, what it was, is I wasn't contacting the really, all the other benefits from a healthy lifestyle.
Gotcha.
The energy increase and the being able to talk about it, share it with others was a big part, as well as like exercise was a lot easier and those sort of things as well. So for me, that was, I guess, a little bit went into it. What else, I guess, goes into why these things may or may not work?
I mean, I think that it's because it's not necessarily, you have to like go to an external source to bring in the system to change your behavior. I mean, you basically have to either commit to this is always going to be there, or it's going to change the system I'm using sufficiently enough that I will be able to, I'll have a new support and a new system in place. So it might be like if it had instead been like going to a gym and maybe you like met some people at the gym and you started working out with those people, like that might be enough to actually maintain even without the stick contract. But if without the piece of having it be a part of the relevant features of your life and it only exists online, I think that's where it's going to start to fall apart for some people if they don't have other ways to bring in other elements of their life that are then going to function a similar way.
I agree. So yeah, that's stick.com. Do you have anything else on Stick?
No, actually, I don't have anything else on self-management. I think that we talked this one to death.
For sure. I was just going to wrap it up. There's a ton of apps out there. Like I could list them for. The other day, I literally looked up, like, I found lists of over 1,000 different ones that, to some extent, are trying to motivate you.
We'll just list them all right now.
Whatever industry you're in, like, there's just hundreds.
Cool.
So I think the best thing to do is if people have anything, they can send in some, drop into the comments, like, what area they're kind of looking for help in.
Yeah, that's
try to kind of crowdsource, like, what are some good tools and apps that are out there for people.
Yeah, I love for other, like, if someone has a problem or they want to change their behavior and other people know of a service or an app that they use, like that'd be great. You guys sort of pool those ideas. Because the purpose of this episode, again, is not to come in and like tell you this is how to fix your behavior, but to talk about like what self-management is and some of the strategies that exist within it and why it works for some people better than others and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Perfect. That's all I got on self-management.
Sweet.
That's
all. I think we're there. We're there. All right. Perfect. Well, I guess we'll catch you next time.
Yeah.
Signing off, this is Abraham.
And Ryan O. Thanks for your time.
All right.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. Why We Do What We Do is supported in part by ABAI's Disseminating Behavior Analysis Special Interest Group and our amazing listeners. If you like what you heard, consider heading to our Patreon account at patreon.com/WWDWWD podcast. Anything helps, and we are continuously lining up perks and merch for our supporters. If you have any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Find us at WWDWWD podcast on your favorite social media platforms. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. There, you'll find links as well as detailed and shareable show notes. Why We Do What We Do is Abraham, Ryan O, and Miranda. Artwork and logo design by Andrew Pollock at nogdesigns.com. Video and production assistance from Tyler Brussier with music courtesy of Justin Greenhouse. Brendan Bohr does our episode art. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.